Today I have the lovely Olivia Tati with me in the house. Olivia, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm so excited to finally be here and do this in person.
Yeah, so Olivia actually just kind of moved to Denver. So
I moved.
You're a nomad. So it's hard to say, but I am just so excited to have you today. Olivia does so much in the real estate space. Not only is she a short-term rental host, but she owns her own business where she teaches others how to get into real estate investing. And so I would just love for you to share a little bit about your story, like share about your life as an engineer and how you transferred into doing short-term rental investments, and tell us what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I used to be a corporate oil and gas engineer. Really funny because I don't look like it. And it's so funny too, because anytime, like when I was an engineer, someone asked me what I did, they were like, what do you do? And now when I tell people, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But yes, used to be a corporate oil and gas engineer, started working, and I was actually in $25,000 worth of credit card debt because when I when I finished grad school, I took a huge 3-month-long trip all throughout Europe and Southeast Asia and hit my 50th country. And I was like, it's going to be fine. I'm going to start working and I will be able to pay this off. It's totally fine. A year goes by of working. I still haven't paid it off. I realize I don't really have like the financial literacy to really understand what I'm doing. So that's when I really dived. I actually got my real estate license part-time on the side. And that's when I discovered real estate investing and Airbnbs and short-term rentals and was hooked. Paid off all of my credit card debt in like 8 months and got under contract within like less than a year on my first property. And then the rest is kind of history. And then I guess quit my job after that. It's a whole thing. We can go over it.
So tell me about like your first property purchase. Like at that point, were you still in your job or did you quit right before that?
Yeah, so I was still in my job. And I always say to people, it's so much easier to get a property when you have a W-2 job, like so much easier. So I was still working my job. I just finished paying off my credit card debt and I'd already actually started putting offers in before I had that completely paid off because I finally got pre-approved. And they're like, no, you can get a property. And I was like, oh, wait, okay, let's do this. So it was a duplex in New Orleans. And my whole thing was I was going to house hack it. So live on one side and then Airbnb out the other side. But then I also made sure to run my numbers out like as a medium-term rental and a long-term rental to make sure that even if I couldn't short-term rent it out, I'd still be good.
Something that I think happens a lot is we get a lot of engineers that are interested in investing in real estate. And the funny thing is I love engineer minds because they typically like are able to analyze their properties really well. They're typically able to systematize. So like, I know that you were in a job that maybe like you didn't love, but I'm sure that skill set actually really does translate into the business that you're in now, surprisingly.
Oh, completely. And I always tell people like, yes, I'm very bubbly and open and all of that, but I love the data. Like I love optimizing and literally everything I do, I find ways to automate it, optimize it. That's just like, I think it's also because a lot of people who go into engineering too, they were sold the dream of engineering kind of. And then they realize it's really not that great. So we're always trying to think of ways on how to optimize it so we have to do less of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think something else that you said is you were like, I was almost done with paying off my credit card debt and I thought that I would have to wait. And that's something that I'm sure you see all the time with your community and I see all the time with my community is like sometimes there's all of this like shame around like, oh, I don't have like enough money to start investing in real estate or, oh, I do have like some credit card debt. And that has like stopped people. I remember like when my husband and I were going through our first loan application, I was like, who's going to give us $500,000? Like we don't have enough money in like our accounts to show them that we're ever going to be able to like pay this back. And I was like, I kind of came to like the loan officer with like so much shame and they're like, you guys have great credit,
right?
Like your monthly debt is like lower than your income. We have this much room and we can qualify you for a loan. Did you feel like that? And like, tell me about the loan products that you stumbled upon.
100%. Yeah. So for my first property, I went FHA. If I'd known about NACA, I would have gone NACA. But
can you talk about that for those who don't know?
Yeah. So FHA is the Federal Housing Association. So you can buy a single family home or up to a fourplex. So 4 units for 3.5% down, which is huge. And like at the time, like I think I had $25,000 in the bank and then I had another $50,000 in my 401k. And so I actually ended up coming to the table with no money out of pocket, which was awesome because, once again, I had my real estate license at the time, so I was able to take some of the commissions that I would have gotten, and I rolled that in. But then I also was able to use a 401k loan to fund the rest of the down payment and the closing costs. And I was like, this is great. And I still got to keep whatever I had in savings. But then NACA is a really awesome, I think it's the HUD that sponsors it or whatever that is. But it's 0% down, $0 in closing costs. They actually can even help you fund renovations. And it's a little bit more of a lengthier process, but it's such a great way for people to get started investing in real estate. I have a lot of students who are actually going through that right now, and one's about to close. I'm so excited, but it's an amazing loan part because you literally come to the table with nothing and sometimes even get money back at the table, which is huge.
I have seen that too. So like I've seen multiple people purchase a property with like $1,500 down. And I know that like there's people listening to this and they're like, that is so irresponsible.
Right.
Dave Ramsey told me not to do that. And like, yes, like there is a level of like, you have to understand what you're getting into. Like if you're going to, buy a single family home at the top of your budget and you're just going to live there with like you and your dog and like,
yes,
ball out in that way, then yeah, like maybe you should think about like, saving up a little bit more in like the traditional like way, but like we didn't start traditionally. And so like I did what you did. Like I started by renting out my basement, and then I used the funds that I could have put towards a down payment, which wasn't that much at the time either. I think we probably had about $25,000 like when we purchased our first home back in 2017.
Yeah.
And so we put those funds towards furnishing, towards renovating. And the cool thing about that, and I know that you've done this too, is like the sweat equity actually increased the value. So like talk to me about like some of the things that you did with your funds, because obviously, there's the acquisition cost, but then what other costs like did you incur after you closed?
Yeah. So after I closed, I remember I had to put like a washer dryer in on both sides of the unit because it was actually new construction, which was awesome because I at the time was working a pretty like strenuous job. Like I was on call 24/7. Sometimes I had to go out to the oil and gas platform. So I was like, I need something easy, right?
And you did it by yourself.
I did. Oh yeah, I did. And well, here's the funny thing too, is like, I remember the day I closed. It was like January 5th. And then I had the property up and running by like January 13th or something like that. So it was literally like nonstop. I did not sleep that week. I would wake up at like 6 a.m, roll out of bed, put my sweats on and go start painting, putting furniture together, doing everything that I could. And anytime any of my friends went to hang out, I'm like, oh my gosh, you want to come over and like help me put up these curtains? But yeah, so it's like furnishing. I remember at the time too, though, I literally moved my furniture that I had in my apartment into my first unit. So like I was sitting with like very minimal furniture on my side, and I didn't care because I wanted to rent out the other side first. Because the thing about when you do purchase a property, you don't actually have to pay your first mortgage payment until the first full month after you've closed. So it's like I closed January 5th. My first payment wasn't until March 1st. So I had a good chunk of time to build up income from this property and use that to pay for my mortgage. And I've literally never paid for that mortgage out of pocket, right? Like, which is amazing, especially when you're like, I think I was 27 or something, super young and was kind of scrappy, but that's the beauty of just getting started, right? You can be scrappy and you learn so freaking much too about like what people like, what people don't like, what's going to market itself. And yeah.
Yeah, people are so afraid to get started, but like, I don't know. I've had people really get hung up on like the fact that they want to have 20% in down payment and they don't want to pay PMI. Like, you're a numbers girl. Like from an economic standpoint, is that a valid concern?
No, because at the end of the day, it's all about the numbers. And this is kind of the same thing with the high interest rates right now. Everyone's so freaked out about the high interest rates. At the end of the day, does the property cash flow, right? Like that is all that matters. It doesn't matter what your interest rate is. It doesn't matter if you have PMI. It just matters like, are you cash flowing on the property right now? Yes or no? And if yes, then go for it.
something that really changed my mindset on that, because, you know, my parents like loved Dave Ramsey, and they were like, you know, you're going to have to pay PMI. And I was like, oh man, this sounds like really expensive. And like the PMI was like $112 a month. And it's like at that time, like when I purchased it, like the property values were increasing by like 5-6% annually. And so I was making like thousands of dollars a month in like appreciation alone. And then on top of that, like when it really like hit home for me, someone was like, you're not paying the PMI, your tenant is.
Exactly.
And that was like all the difference for me. And so like some downsides too on that program are, you know, you might have like a higher interest rate. And so that's something to take into consider. And like, I love this for like house hackers in particular, because like for you, like you were living on one side, you were renting out the other. Did it offset your cost? Did it pay like the entire amount?
It more than exceeded. So like my mortgage for that property was like $2,400. I remember the first month I had it live, it had done $6,000 or $7,000
on just one side of the duplex.
On just one side.
And this is in New Orleans.
Yes.
That's
and
amazing.
I was literally like, I am a genius.
I'm a mogul.
Literally. And I remember like I took a trip to Italy like a month or two. Well, here the funny thing actually is the day my property went live, I booked a trip to Costa Rica. So I literally like pressed the live button from Costa Rica and I was like, oh, I did it.
That's amazing. And I think a lot of people too, like, I wonder if you felt like this, because like I know that you're like Enneagram 7 and like super free spirit. Did you feel, especially as a single woman, did you feel that like it was overly committal to purchase a property? Because I see people get hung up on that. They like have this mindset of like, I need to purchase like my home or like my forever home. And like, I don't want to be like brought down by this property. Like I want to have flexibility and freedom. Do you feel that having a property has like taken away some of that?
As a nomad, I would say no. And this is what I tell people all the time. It's like, especially that first property, especially if you plan on house hacking it and you're buying it with an investment mindset, it's not supposed to hold you down. It's supposed to propel you forward. And that's exactly what I did. So I, like, once I quit my corporate job, traveled around for the last, like, year and a half about. Like, I've just been all over the place, as everyone has seen on social media. And that's because I had the income coming in from both sides of my duplex, you know? And I was like, well, yeah, this covers everything. Like, it covers all of my living expenses. This is giving me the freedom to be able to go do that. If I hadn't purchased a property, that's when I'd be a lot more nervous. I wouldn't have income coming in. So yeah, no, buying real estate, if you're buying it as your personal home, like I want to live in this for the next 10 years, then yeah, and you're buying a single family home that's not bringing in any income, yes, that can hold you back. But if you're buying it from an investment standpoint, that is not what it's going to do. It's going to help you go forward, because I bought it knowing that I would probably move in maybe a year or 2 years. And that's exactly what I did. A couple months ago, I just took all of my stuff, like all of my personal belongings, and converted it into a furnished rental full time. And it's there and it's doing its thing.
Yeah, I think that that's such an important mindset shift. And actually, like, I'll admittedly say, like, I ended up purchasing like almost 2 years ago, like a house that like I really love. And I would say that like it's a house that my husband and I are going to be there for like a long time. It has slowed me from like a real estate investment portfolio. And so like if you're listening to this and like you're looking to like get started, house hacking is such a good way. And like if you could keep doing that
yes,
for as long as possible, do that. Because I feel like talk about that. Like talk about like the snowball effect of doing the strategy that you did.
Well, yeah, and because that is also like I really don't plan on not house hacking for at least another 5 years. Also because like I don't plan on like quote unquote settling down, if that means. Like I do think for me now Colorado is like finally I found like a permanent spot in the US that I want. But I also expect me to buy a place in Italy and spend half the year there and half the year here. But the beautiful thing about house hacking is you can get into it with low down payment loans. So you can get in at 0%, 3%, 5%, right? And each
multiple
year,
times, right?
Multiple times, right? So you can use FHA. I've learned recently up to twice, which is awesome. It's like, so you can have an FHA loan on 2 properties. They just have to be a certain distance away. You can use, now they have 5% down loans for multifamily, but even if you go single family, right? So for example, in Colorado, right? a lot of duplexes tend to be more than a single family home with a basement. And a single family home with a basement is a very easy conversion to house hack. And especially if you get something that has more than like 5 or 6 bedrooms, right? Then you can even get a roommate. And it's like each year, if you're doing that, now you do one a year, you have 5 properties that are cash flowing that you got into for anywhere from 0 to 5% down. You have millions of dollars worth of real estate just there, which is huge.
Yeah, it is so huge. So like, let's talk about that. Like, let's say that, you have house hacked like once a year for the next 5 years. What does that investment look like for you long term? Like, what does that mean for you 30 years down the road? Like, how do you keep that portfolio? How do you maximize that portfolio?
Totally. So I think a lot of the time people think of just cash flow, right? Like they're like, okay, well, I'm investing for cash flow, which is so important. I will say, especially if you're getting started, don't buy a property that is losing you money right off the bat. And if you don't have a ton of money, right? Like try and buy something that is cash flow. But even if you buy something where it's just reducing your like outlay of expenses, right? Like let's say you live somewhere like Colorado and you're paying $2,500 a month in rent, you can go house hack and now be only paying $1,000 or $500, right? So thinking of that first, but really where the true value is in the equity, right? Because now you're kind of building these little piggy banks that you can tap into later down the line if you want to get started, like if you want to build your portfolio or if you want to start a business or if you want to do anything. You're literally like your tenant is paying down the loan. So you're building so much equity in these 3, 4, 5 properties, which is so huge. Like this is how millionaires and billionaires are made.
Yes. And like, it's so crazy to think about that. So like, let's say that you bought, 5 properties at $500,000. You're having somebody else pay your loan. That property is appreciating in value. So I mean, like, that's a way that like if you just put tenants in there that like cover your costs, that property that's $500,000, let's say it doesn't change in value at all.
Yeah.
Now you own that $500,000 asset outright.
Yes. And let's say you only put 5% down, right? So that's $25,000 with closing costs, whatever. In what world can you manage and like own $500,000 from only putting in $25,000? Like that just, there is no other investment in which you can do that.
Yeah, it's like the craziest thing because like debt, like when used well, is such a powerful tool. And like I was definitely raised on like debt is bad, like don't over leverage. And there is a balance. Like you don't want to put yourself in a position where, if a furnace goes out that, you're going to be in a very bad position. So what would you say for someone who's, maybe just getting started, they don't have a lot of extra cash? Like I know that you mentioned that you were able to like tap into your 401k. Like what things should someone consider that they might have as assets to help them with purchasing their first home?
Yeah, I think retirement funds in general are great. So either 401k, even your Roth IRA, there's certain things. So you can either, in your Roth IRA, you can take up to $10,000 out penalty free. But actually just in general with your Roth IRA, you can take as much out, like as much of your contributions out that hasn't actually like gained, I forgot what the term is, but hasn't actually like gained money on it. You can take that out penalty free as well. So those, and a lot of people are like, no, don't take money out of your 401k. It's all about return on investment, right? So where are you going to get the highest return? I know for me, when I took my money out, I was like, I'm going to be cash flowing so much more on this property that's going to be setting me up way better than if it were sitting in my 401k. And the funny thing was, by the end of that year, I'd already gotten back to the same point in my 401k that I was the year before. But then also, like, if you do, I think people will like think poorly of anyone whose parents give them gifted funds. I'm like, that's so I'm not a parent right now, but as a parent, I want to be able to provide for my kids, right? And if I can help them get into a property, that's an amazing way to do it. So if you do have parents who are willing to give you a few $1,000s, use it. Like, don't be ashamed of that. Like, power to you. We have to use our resources to get ahead, people.
Yes. My business partner, his first question is always, will your parents give you money?
I love that so much.
Yeah. And I've had clients where, their parents are also excited about the investment opportunity. And like, actually my first ever fix and flip, I haven't like really talked about this much or shared this story, but my mom was a ballet teacher and she basically had this like savings account of cash and she used that cash like for everybody's wedding. And when I found my first flip ever, like I knew it was like this like screaming deal. I didn't have quite enough to like do it on my own. And my mom actually became my business partner.
I love that.
And like, so she like helped like put up the funds like to acquire the property. We flipped it. And then I was able to give her like 10% return within like 2 months on her funds. And that just went right back into like the wedding pot. So you're welcome, sisters.
Right?
Like who got that? Because at that point I was already married, but like I've seen that happen before. And of course you want like, I was not going to lose my mom's money.
No. Oh, yeah, no.
Like, no way.
Yeah.
And it like was such a cool thing to like be able to do together. And it was really special. And like, I had done my due diligence and I was able to educate her on the investment opportunity. And I think that like I've seen people do that with their families. And it just like, it's a really special thing to be able to build wealth together in that way.
Oh, completely. And it's like a lot of the time they want to help, right? I understand too. So I come from a very like immigrant background, or not very immigrant background, but I have an immigrant background, right? So my family, they're from West Africa and Angola. And I know for me, like I just grew up super hyper independent. And I realized like I've got a lot of stuff to work through from that hyper independence. So I understand the like, not wanting to ask your parents, be super independent, but like you're literally just shooting yourself in the foot. So it's like, can you remove your ego for a hot second and realize this is actually going to benefit everyone involved in the situation? So I think it's like having that reframe and that mindset shift is so crucial.
Yeah, I think so too. And I hope that anybody who is listening to this and is like, maybe mom would want to be like a business partner. Like we hope that this does give you the confidence to like talk about that as well. And then tell me about like managing. So you like have touched on the fact that you're like world traveler. If you guys haven't already followed her on Instagram, we'll be sure to post that so you can follow along. What is it like having a portfolio in the United States and having to manage it on like a different time zone? Like what type of systems have you put in place to make sure that you have the freedom to not be slowed down by this investment?
So automation is key. And this is regardless of where you are. And so the funny thing is too, so I bought my first duplex, but I already knew going in, I was going to set it up so that I could be anywhere in the world. Like I said, I hopped on a flight to Costa Rica the day that it went live, right? So even if you are house hacking, it is so tempting, right? To be like, oh no, I'm going to go in and fix everything. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to tinker. No. Okay. Set it up from day one as if you are never going to be there, right? And I remember I didn't go into my other unit for months after it went live, right? So first thing is automation for guest messaging. So I use Hospitable. There's a bunch of different ones you can use, but Hospitable will actually go in and send automated messages to all of your guests. There are just like 5 to 10 messages, I would say, that you do send out to every single one of your guests, and you can even automate certain prompts and things like that. It's also a great way to see all of your calendars in one for all of your properties that you have. And then personally, I'm a big fan of Turno because I remember literally being in Italy, having to send Venmo payments to my cleaner, and I'm like, this is annoying. I cannot. So Turno automates all of this, sends it to them automatically. You don't have to think about it. And then you can even put things like inventory lists in there as well. And also, the thing I do really like about Turno is, let's say your cleaner is sick and you don't have a backup, you can actually find one in the app, which is amazing. And then I've got Price Labs, which is another automation tool that helps with dynamic pricing. Another thing that I am going to touch on actually is having a VA is huge. Because, and this is a recent development where I'm just like, why am I answering these messages, right? And because there'll still be every once in a while, a guest will ask something that isn't a part of the like bank of questions, right? So now my VA is the one who communicates with my cleaners. He's the one who like does any of the guest messaging, like all of the extra little guest messaging that's here and there, which isn't often, right? Like it's like sometimes not at all during the week. And sometimes there's like 5 messages or 10 messages during a week. It just kind of depends. It's the nature of short-term rentals, right? But like putting all of those systems in place so you don't have to be the one doing it is key. Oh yeah. And then the Schlage Encode Wi-Fi lock is huge because it will actually create a new code for each of your guests, completely automated. Usually you can put it as the last 4 digits of their phone number to make it really easy so you don't have to worry about keys getting lost and things like that. So you're always thinking, how can I make this easier for me? And like literally something that I write down in my journal every single day this year, I started doing it in January, is life doesn't have to be hard. How do I make it easy? You know, because that especially when you're doing real estate, when you're doing any business, it's how do I make this easier, not harder?
Yeah, I really, really like that mindset shift. And like we were talking about before, not everybody wants to replace their job with this. And so like for people who don't want this to take up all of their time, this is so important. And like talk to me about like why someone who might really like their job as an engineer, what should they consider in investing in real estate?
Yeah, I think, you know, especially with social media, we see, and to be fair, I'm somewhat a culprit of this with my content, right? Is we think that whenever we get into real estate investing, it has to completely replace our income, especially if you're making 6 figures, right? That can sometimes be a lot of real estate, right? Like that, you're like, okay, well, this is going to take me 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, even though I will tell you now, it doesn't have to take you that long. But a lot of the time that's some of the limiting beliefs that we have, right? But the thing is real estate doesn't have to completely replace your income. It can just supplement your income to give you more freedom and flexibility, because that's my big thing. That's always been my mission in life. That's what I preach to everyone is, I got into real estate to supplement the lifestyle that I want to live. And for me, what that looks like, it's traveling the world whenever I want and being able to wake up without an alarm and do the things that I want to do during the day and build a really cool business that I really freaking love, right? So for anyone who's like who resonates with that and they're like, yeah, I just want like another option in terms of retirement, right? Because I don't know about you, but we all went through COVID, right? And the number of people at my corporate job who were like, yeah, well, I guess I can't retire like for another few years now. Like I was supposed to retire this year, but my 401k went down, right? And so you can't be dependent on one source of income. You can't be dependent on one retirement fund. You have to create your own systems for yourself. And that's what real estate can really do for you.
Mm-hmm. It can diversify your available resources and hedge against some of that. Yeah, I think that that's really important because we talk a lot about, you know, how I quit my job and replaced my income with like this or that, but that's not everybody's dream. And thank God. I mean, like we need engineers and doctors and nurses. And like, if you do have a really busy job, it doesn't mean that you can't invest in real estate. And it doesn't mean that it has to take up your entire life. Like I have several clients who are netting an extra 30 grand. And like for some people, that's a big deal. For other people, it means nothing. You know, maybe that's like your car payment. Like what,
Yeah.
like it really is all relative to like where you're at in your life. And I think that like designing like your future with that in mind is really cool that you've been doing that.
Well, and so one of my close friends, he used to be a nurse practitioner, right? And he started investing in real estate, has a few properties, and was just able to get a job that didn't suck as much, right? Like, and now he works remotely. He works like 3 to 4 hours a day, but he also has the income coming in from his real estate. And the only way he was able to do that was by investing. And now it just kind of gives him the freedom and flexibility to do life the way that he actually wants to do it.
Yeah, that's so true too. And that was true for me. Like when I transitioned from like medical sales, I had like so much guilt around that. I was like, oh my gosh, like I should love this, like, but I hate it. And then like, I'm just going to go and try to become like a realtor and get into real estate. And like, you know, I don't have much of a cushion, but like, as soon as I like purchased a property and it started producing, it kind of lifted this weight from me where I know a lot of people have a lot of fear around investing. And I thought that was going to be me too. But now I'm like, that thing is stable.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes like your safety blanket. Like, have you felt that about your investments? Like right now it's like, it's pretty volatile. Like, what are you seeing in your personal investments? Like talk about like the journey that it may have been. Like, have there been moments where it was like scary, or like you had to like contribute a lot of money, or has it been stable?
So I will say, like, I think I've gotten pretty lucky. Like, my portfolio is pretty gosh darn stable. We did have like one really big expense actually like a month or two ago on one of our properties, because it's out like in the boonies a little bit, and it's on a well system. So just an FYI, you may have, depending on how old it is, you may have some expenses. It was like $8,000 out of pocket, right? Luckily, we did have reserves though, so the property had been producing for a while. But yeah, I think it's like the first few months tend to be a little bit volatile, especially if you're just like putting your systems in place. You're still, especially if you don't have superhost status yet on Airbnb, it may take a little bit to kind of gear up. But like once you're especially a year in, it's pretty stable. And it depends on the property you buy as well, right? So if you're buying something that is a little bit older, just know like factor in a roof change or factor in a heater change in your calculations, right? And this goes back to like the engineering mind and the numbers, right? It's like you want to make sure to factor those in and be putting money aside every month towards that.
And I have people too that will sometimes be like, well, this is going to take my entire life savings. And I'm like, let's look at loan products where maybe it doesn't take your entire life savings. Because I've had that a lot where people are like, nope, I made this goal for myself and I'm going to put 5% down, 15% down, 20, 25% down, like whatever it is. And then it just doesn't leave them with a lot of extra funds. And so for me, I'm always like, I want to see you have a little bit of cushion. And if that means like putting less money down and paying $100 a month towards PMI, God forbid, like I would rather see you with that $10,000 available.
Well, and that's why I tapped into my 401k, right? Because I was like, okay, I can tap into this and still have my $25,000 in the bank in case anything happens, right? Versus just draining my bank account from $25,000 and it being way harder to tap into other things. Because I guess the other thing with the 401k loan is, it depends on your 401k, but for a lot of them out there, if you're doing a primary residence purchase, you can do a 30-year fixed loan at a really low interest rate. So my payment on that $25,000 that I took out is $100 a month, which is huge. And it's amazing. I don't have to pay it back for another 20 something years,
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing for people to consider is like, how are you using your funds, and are you protecting yourself? Like, are you protecting your downside? Because like, you just don't want to be in a position where like something goes wrong, because getting money out of a property is kind of hard.
It's tied in there. It is tied in there. And like, that's even, so I'm buying a property here in Colorado and planning on doing the same thing, so I transferred my 401k. This is another thing for anyone who's moved jobs. Track down your old 401ks and your old retirement funds and throw them into either like a self-directed IRA or another solo 401k or into another retirement fund, because you probably have money sitting around, right? But I transferred mine into a solo 401k so that I could do the same thing and take out, 50% of that and put that into another property too.
Yeah, I really think that that's important too, that like you can sometimes find funds that like you didn't even know exist. I had a client who like did that recently, and he did like a self-directed IRA, and like he's buying real estate through that. And so like take a look at like what benefits you might have outside of just cash. What things would you tell someone who is like looking at analyzing a first property? Like let's say that, let's just say that this person has $25,000 like in reserves. Yeah. Let's say that they want to use a first-time home buyer loan with like low money down. Like, what are some factors that they should consider when they're analyzing a property?
Yeah. So, I mean, really, when it comes to analyzing property, it's income versus expenses. Like those are the two main buckets. Income tends to be relatively easy, right? Like depending on which strategy you're doing, if you're doing short-term rental, long-term rental, medium-term rental, but let's say short-term rental, reach out to Chantal and she will tell you exactly what that is going to be. But you can look at apps like, AirDNA, and there are so many different ones out there that you can use. Rabu, exact. Mashvisor, I think is another one.
Point Analytics.
And then when it comes to expenses, right, everyone thinks it's just the mortgage, right? It's not just the mortgage. People, like we were saying before, if you have like let's say you have something that's old, let's say you have a water heater that's 10 to 13 years old, you may want to start to factor that into when that could potentially die, because you may have to pay that up front. So you would actually take that and divide it by how many months, let's say, you think it's going to actually survive for, and plug that into your numbers. Another thing is, like, if you are going the short-term rental route, right? So you've got cleaning fees, although really the cleaning fees are kind of a pass-through because your guest is going to be paying for that. You've got Wi-Fi, you've got electricity, you've got water fees. So when you think of, your general utilities, right, that's going to be a big thing. But then the thing that I think a lot of people do not consider with short-term rentals is you do have extra supplies as well, like cleaning supplies. I went through and replaced like all of my towels the other day at one of my property just because it's been a few years. So it's time to get a replacement, sheets, stuff like that. So you just kind of want to be putting money aside towards that. And that's going to be in your expenses bucket. Probably forgot something because there's a few different line items there. But
yeah, I think that that's very important to be able to accurately like model what your income and expenses are. And I think that that's where like network really matters.
Yeah.
Like, who is in your network, or can you go and find people that have done this before you that can give you an idea of like what that actually is going to be. And then I really liked because we work with a lot of like single women who are buying properties, and I think that that is so cool. Something that I like that you did is you bought a new build.
yes. Oh, it was the best thing ever. It's hard now because I bought both new builds and older properties. I love new builds so much. It's just easy. It's easy. Now, note that with a new build, right, you can't force equity as much, right? Unless you're really going in and adding stuff. So if you're doing like a short-term rental, you can kind of, zhuzh it up to force a little bit more equity. But like, I bought it 3.5% down. It's gonna appreciate the way the market appreciates. I can't force as much appreciation unless I do an addition somewhere or something like that. But especially for a first property, it's just like peace of mind, right? Like I know the property is good, general. And the thing about new builds as well is you get new home warranty as well. So I remember that first year I had like something broke in the closet. So I just called up the builder and they came by and fixed it, right? And that's something to really consider as well. And depending on the location, I think when people think new builds, they're like, oh man, that's going to be expensive. A lot of the times it's actually not, because a lot of new builds are being built in more transitioning areas. And that's exactly what I was going through. Also thinking about appreciation and an investment opportunity, I was like, let me go somewhere where I know, like, it looks like they're doing lots of new constructions. The prices across the street are way higher, and meaning that the prices of these ones are also eventually going to get up there too. So it's just always something to consider. I love me a new build.
Yeah, I really like that for people who are just getting started out and who feel like, I don't have a lot of money. Like I don't have a lot of extra. Like if something goes wrong, like getting something that is really turnkey with a really clean inspection is going to protect your downside. And I think like this entire conversation has really just been about how do you use what you have and maximize that. Because if you have $25,000, like there are things that you can do to get started. Or if you have a 401k, like there are things that you can do to get started. How can people find you, Olivia?
Yes, you can find me on all of the socials. I am very active, a little too active sometimes on Instagram. So my handle is at the Olivia Tati. I also have a YouTube channel and a podcast. So at the Olivia Tati on YouTube, and my podcast is the Wanderlust Wealth Show. But yeah, find me on all the socials. I am always there.
And tell us, before we close out, tell us a little bit about your program that you have for people who are thinking about buying their first property.
Yes, so it's called the Wanderlust Wealth Academy. It's all about helping mainly young women, but we do have one guy in there right now, but mainly helping young women on how to get started investing in real estate. We have like 10 students under contract right now, which is so freaking exciting. And we like literally hold your hand throughout the entire process. Every single thing, every question, anything, like you come to us. We've also just got all the systems in place. So all of the systems that I was talking about, just in terms of how I manage it from anywhere in the world, it's all included. There's a lot of mindset work too, which is super fun. And now I'm actually coming up with a new course that's all about so I travel, and use my real estate to travel, right? So through home exchanges, through trusted house. There's so many different things out there, so many different hacks. So that gets all included as well.
Oh, cool. Like a travel hack portion. You've given me some like cool like hacks. You've been like, oh, you need to get on to like this platform or that where you can actually trade. Yeah, she's really, really good at that stuff.
I know. I am currently staying in $1 million house here in Colorado, which is fabulous for free. Well, no, for $100.
Oh, wow.
I know, right?
Well, I love that. Thanks so much for coming. And for anybody who would like to get in touch with Olivia, we will have her information in the show notes, and we will talk to you all soon.